Hello, my name's host Eric. I'm here with host Ken. We're chit-chatting in the calm, quiet voices of Sunday evening. In the calm and quiet of a Sunday evening, people use their Sunday voices,
hmm
and they discuss Sunday topics. Today's Sunday topic is the moving of other people. The dynamic that says, I am an individual who wishes to evoke or provoke some kind of change in you, either behaviorally, like I want you to do something specific, and perhaps you are giving me resistance about it in some fashion, or, well, I mean, it's always going to be behaviorally, but additionally, you might want to evoke change in terms of somebody's attitudes or general framework for things because you feel as though they're not fulfilling their potential or that they're wrong or something like that. So, when we're talking about the moving of people around, the first point to address is why are you moving them around? Are you actually justified in moving them around? And if so, by what, so to speak? And what is wrong with this one? Is it not working or what? So that's the first issue is we all would like everybody in the world to conform to our wishes and our will regarding how they behave towards us and potentially as well how they react to how we behave towards them. But the reality is, most of the time, we have to acknowledge that we're denied complete control over those things, or even little amount of control over those things, and that reciprocity is a universal good. So, reciprocity precludes one from becoming too selfish, basically. Too selfish, yeah. Hi, Nandi. And
Hello.
and reciprocity is all well and good, but that's just one of the tools in which people move one another around because that exists as a reality, whether we choose to exploit it or not. To the extent that you're aware of it, it's going to impact your expectations of others and your ability to. It's one thing you can use to provoke people to behave in the ways you want them to behave. So, okay, that's the first issue is why do you want to move people around? And I think the answer to that is twofold. One, either because you've got a clear vision of what ought to be done and something needs to be done and others have a less clear vision or are failing to articulate the clear vision. In other words, you have to step up and take leadership. Or possibly two, because it's it's inherently part of life that people are going to be moving and moved. They're going to be moving themselves. They're going to be moving others, and they're going to be moved by others. And so, if you're going to have to be part of that system in general, then you might as well be the one who's dictating the motion. Um, Now, once we've addressed this issue of why do we want to move people in the first place, or is it sort of morally justified? Aren't we really sort of violating the deontological principle, treating other individual agents as means to an end if we're trying to get them to do stuff that we want them to do rather than trying to, I don't know, respect them more or something. But the fact is, people are in various stages of development too, and it can be evident to a third party what can be very difficult for one's own self to recognize about one's own self. So things, truths that are hard to face about yourself can be sometimes even painfully obvious to third parties, depending on what stage of development you're in. If you're in a really early stage of development, you're really fighting against the truth and really trying to repress it and really trying to be something other than that or something like that, then those individuals are going to have a very difficult time objectively seeing their own nature and their own behaviors and may need guidance from a third party. So, of course, stage of development is not the same thing as age. There are people of all different sort of ages in all different stages of development. I've seen people, a lot of people my age who are in fairly early stages of development as far as I'm concerned, that I know, even people who I consider friends, personal friends, some of them I think are, I mean, some of them are just straight up lost, either because they are behaving in some sort of non-sustainable way with drugs or alcohol, or they just maybe they don't feel as though it's safe enough to be who they are. They've got to continue to present in ways that I think are not conducive to optimization of the self. So the stage of development thing is important, and how one reacts to others and relates to others has a lot to do with stage of development and type and the combination of the two things. If you want to move people around, then you've got to be aware of that vector. And that's just sort of an introduction to a couple thoughts on the matter. I'd like to open the floor to these guys, and with the mindset of trying to keep the videos at a reasonable length today instead of letting myself just forget about that and let it just go on forever. So, you guys have any thoughts?
I have a few. Just trying to think of, trying to decide whether or not I'm going to take it off in a slightly different direction or if I'm going to try to stick specifically to what you're talking about. Now, when you're talking about the movement of people, you're talking about trying to get them to act in a way that falls in line with your unconscious values. Is it something like that? Hello?
That's a yes.
Sorry, I don't know if maybe you're not looking at the pictures, but I turned down my mic so I could pull up on rep so it doesn't get in the sound on the video, and I was trying to give you a thumbs up. Yes, that's what you're saying is right, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't see your screen at the moment.
Okay, so yeah, I'm turning off my mics because I hate the sound of bong reps always interrupting the other person when they're talking.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead,
Um,
explain your thoughts because yeah, you're right about that assessment of the thing you were asking.
okay. So, I was actually going to talk about it in coming at it from a bit of a different angle. You're talking about, trying to get people to, sort of conform to maybe your own set of values. But something that's been on my mind kind of recently is how when dealing with your own values, you can get stuck in a way of thinking, and sometimes I notice that there might be something that occurs, like decisions other people make or value have, that when you come into contact with them, they have this effect of changing the way that you think about things. So even though I think you were talking more about actively trying to change the way people think, I think there's also another part of it, which is
The more manipulative part. I got to deal with this timer thing here.
okay.
Nandi and Casper, talk to Ken so he's not lonely.
Hello, Nandi.
Hello.
Um, I think he's recording right now, so I think I can
Yeah,
continue with
you're
what I'm
good.
saying. But no, the example I was going to talk about was not necessarily what he had mentioned, talk about the manipulative. It's not so much that, it's the effect that others can have on you and the effect that you can have on others just by the actions that you take, not necessarily with you having any sort of conscious effort to change their thinking. And an example I'd use for that is that for many years I've sort of have had it in my head that, when it comes to creatively, I guess, being a consumer versus being a producer, like, you have some people who just, they watch a lot of YouTube videos, and then you might have another group of people that they make a lot of YouTube videos or something like that. Or, you might have someone who listens to a lot of music or someone who makes a lot of music. They're not necessarily exclusive, but the example I was going to use in reference to talking with famous people is that, for me, sort of a thought that I've had in my head is, sometimes I'll get discouraged thinking that there's too much of a gap between me just being a consumer of information or creativity, or, as host Eric refers to, some internet media time objects is what he calls them. The distance between me just being a consumer and me being a producer, someone who's active in creating something or taking a part of something. I had it in my head for a long time that there was a very large or very, big distance between where I was at and where I needed to be. And it had sort of a discouraging effect, and so to me that was sort of a, in a way that was sort of an anti-movement that I had going on in my mind that was like keeping me from just trying things. I also had kind of like a perfectionistic mindset. But for me, I noticed something that helped to break that a little bit was coming into talking with famous people, and immediately, upon showing up, you get referred to as, famous person, whatever your name is. I think in the span of 2 weeks, Eric's referred to me as host Ken or different stuff like that. And even if there's not, even if it's just sort of like a fun joke or anything like that, I sort of have only recently began to realize the positive effect that that's had specifically for me, because I've had it in my head that, I'm mainly a consumer. I don't produce a lot of things. More than that, I didn't really think of myself as being involved in anything. And for me, like the sort of the, I don't think this is a word, but invitiveness or something, just the warmth that talking with famous people has around it, and the people involved made me feel like I was, a part of something to a degree. And so I guess how
You are
I'm trying to tie
particularly good at this. You're particularly good at this, Ken. You are, and I appreciate your being here. I try to be warm for everybody, but you're well suited for hosting shit. I don't know if that's the most useful skill to have in life necessarily. It depends, right? You got to have an opportunity to use it. That's the thing you're saying, basically. It's like, I have an opportunity to use some of my skills, and it makes me feel better about myself. And I feel
Well, I
the
think
same way. I
any,
feel exactly the same fucking way, dude. So much so, I feel the same way.
I think with anyone, with any human being, you want to feel like you're contributing something. So even if that's a small thing, I like something, I guess, for me, relating to what you were talking about with movement of people, for me, sort of psychological movement or, change in values that happen in my mind is I had it in my head, oh, I'm at point A and point B is just way too far out there. It always seemed like a gap. It was like a discouraging thing for me to even get started, because it's, everything seemed like such a big project or stuff like that. I think, oh, maybe I'll put up like, a video of this, or maybe I'll write this song, or maybe I'll try to put a band together, different stuff like that. And it always seemed like in their infancy, different plans just sort of died down. But
Because like your play becomes work,
yeah,
That's what happens, and
because
then it's not fun
because
anymore.
yeah, and for me, sometimes trying to tackle things by myself makes it seem like I'm trying to take on all the parts of is discouraging. I
Right.
like to be, I like to be, sort of goaded on and poked to go forward on certain things. So it was,
It,
helpful.
Encouragement is something that, when genuine encouragement is something that I have come to value a great deal. When other people encourage me, like, um, well, you've encouraged me for sure, and like somebody who commented on my sitting bull video and said,
Uh,
"I think that's a good bit. This is a good video." Or I think they said, "I think this is the best one," or something like that. But the point is,
uh,
that mattered a lot. I was like, "Oh, thank God," because I worry about the comedy stuff a lot, right? Like that is undeniably, here I am. I'm presenting to you something that is supposed to be funny, right?
uh-huh.
That comedy's so much easier when you do it in the context of, all right, we're talking about an interesting subject, and I can interject some jokes here and there, right? You got something to fall back on. You don't have to be funny the whole time. But with the Chain Bolt thing, it's, shall we say, farcical or um, not true, because I didn't actually interview Sitting Bull. Were you fooled? I wasn't. I'm not sure I was clear enough in the title there.
Well, I'm pretty sure he died, so, I wasn't immediately convinced that you actually interviewed Sitting Bull. The problem
No.
is you're choosing people that, lived in a previous century. You gotta keep it more up to date.
I've tried contemporary celebrities. The only ones who've responded are the dead ones so far.
Okay.
Uh, so moving people. All right. So I don't know what you guys exactly were talking about during part of that time, but
It was me slowly rambling and building up to what I said when you came back.
right, cool. My feelings on it have evolved a lot over the last couple of years, and they've evolved because on some level, I started giving people less credit. I realized that when I was younger, I assumed everybody knew what they were doing and what they were talking about, and if they didn't seem to, I assumed it was because they were trying to trick me.
Hmm. I definitely got the first part. I don't think I've had the second part where I've thought that people were trying to trick me. Um, for me, it was more I figured people knew what they were doing, and if they didn't, then I thought there must be something like physically or chemically wrong with them or something like that.
Well, here's what I
Maybe
mean
they were
by
like,
trying
yeah,
to trick me. I don't mean like trying to deceive me exactly. I viewed it in the frame of debating. Like, well, they're just plain dumb because they don't want to argue those vectors, right?
uh-huh,
Because they're not exactly. I didn't view it exactly as them playing dumb so much as refusing to engage correctly, which is a smart strategy. Is to engage incorrectly with their point in a way that makes it seem like that's the only logical way to engage with it is a perfectly good strategy to use, right?
I
Uh,
I think it's funny how you talk about it in like a debating framework. Like you think people you come at it like someone they're going to be debating me or something like that. For me, if I see somebody enter into I guess what you're referring to is that sort of tricking sort of mode. For me, it was more like oh, there's some greater truth that they're just not ready to hear or something like that. For me, it was like more truth oriented. Like they're
well,
not you know
that would be the INFJ take on that. Is
yeah
that they're not ready to hear my truth, whereas the ENTP take on it is um, they're they're debating to avoid my point.
they're not ready to handle my arguments. I think.
I mean, I didn't think they weren't ready to handle them. I thought like those stubborn fucks, like they're smart debaters too, and they want to avoid. They know where their weak ground is, and they're trying to they're trying to get me. They're trying to throw me off. Like
Yeah.
I'll get them pinned down eventually. The reason you're not pinning them down, Eric, is because they have no fucking idea what you're talking about. I didn't realize that until a few years ago. It's like I just would talk about shit to people and they'd be like, I don't understand what that means. It's like, fucking liars. Fucking liars.
Yeah.
They're always doing this shit to me. I don't know what they're doing this for.
Yeah.
Why does everybody want to argue with me about everything? That was my take on when they tell me I don't understand. It's like, why does everybody want to argue with me about everything? It's crazy, yo. Anyway, I'm aware of that now, though. Now, JC, I think you were going to say something. I'm sorry, or Nandi, one of the two. I interrupted you. Okay. Well, yeah, the thing about it now, I realize, okay, well, a lot of times it almost always it's enough to be right and have the right arguments. That's enough. Whatever it is. Like, I'm constantly battling with my partner right now, but I'm beating her into submission because she's used to thinking about things as being a certain kind of stuff, and what I'm bringing to her is something that's very different, and I'm having to explain it to her over and over again. I'm having to like move her in the sense that I need her to start thinking about it properly. Anyway, um, the way to get your way is to be very, for me, the easiest way is just to be very firm in describing what your way is. And the other technique I use a lot of is if I'm getting pushback on something, I do the equivalent of spreading them out, which means I give them a shitload of reasons until they're just like, yeah, okay, fine, enough, And if they don't do that, if they're being feisty, well, then I've laid all that shit out on the flow. And so when they say something, they say, I answered that in my fourth point, my third sub point, or my fourth point. Weren't you paying attention? Like, yeah. What am I gonna fucking do with this guy? So that's my default mechanism. If that doesn't work, though, the other alternative is to give up the dominance thing, to like lose the dominance thing. You just be like, okay, I'll give you the dominance position. I'll come to you as a supplicant and hope you'll be nice to me.
I've expressed my own struggle with listing a price and holding around it. Opportunities to trade values can slip breath to the spirit.
So are you whispering to us? Are you
Oh no,
whispering sweet,
sorry about that.
are you whispering sweet nothings to the group?
Yeah, I was just writing an essay real quick.
Speaking in tongues is what he's doing. He's speaking in tongues.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
like the third time I had to write an essay about social media.
What did you write about? What did you say about it? It's bad?
No, that was the argument for the person that the article was about, but I try to refute them and complicate it more.
Ah, good. Important bow. Throw a bunch of Bo's nonsense at it. That'll do the trick, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on this moving people around thing? We're at 23 minutes on this video. I'm going to try to keep them on the shorter side than this, but this is a topic that requires a little bit of stretching of the legs. Anybody else wish to comment on the moving people around?
You want to just split it up into two parts?
Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you, Ken. Thanks for watching Talking to People. Part 2 to come.